Hi guys, this is Chase. Thank you for hanging out in this feed. I want to let you know two things I'm excited about. The first is, in just a moment, if you keep listening, you're going to hear episode 1 of a brand new podcast project that I released this week called the InterestingPod. It is all about a deadly and very interesting Erie River in Yorkshire, England, called the Bolton Strid, that supposedly has a 100% fatality rate for anybody that falls in. We're going to tell some stories and do some real historical digging into the merciless Bolton Strid. Second, later on this week, at least in the next few days, I am going to be releasing episode number 1 in this feed of a brand new podcast that I'm calling the BEACHcast. Like I said earlier, that has two meanings: beach because I live close to the beach and I love the beach, but also the BE stands for Bible exploration, the A stands for apologetics, and the CH stands for church history. And we're going to be doing those things in this podcast, Lord willing, on a regular basis coming up very soon. The first episode is going to explore the deaths of Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan in light of the good news of Jesus. So I hope you will hang around for that. It should be out in the next few days. For now, enjoy episode number 1 of the Interesting Pod. By the way, to subscribe to the new podcast, all you got to do is go to Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast provider you're on and search for Interesting Pod, all one word, Interesting Pod, and that should pull it up. If you have any trouble whatsoever, just go to our website, InterestingPod.com, and that has links to pretty much every podcast app out there. It doesn't show up everywhere yet because it's a brand new show, but searching for Interesting Pod, all one word, should do it. Okay, on to the show.
Not every tale from history made the textbooks. Some were too strange, too secret, too interesting. Debunking myths and digging up the truth. We don't peddle half-baked lies, rumors, or unfounded conspiracies. And we don't accept easy answers either. Your host is Dr. Chase, historian, author, storyteller. You bring the curiosity, we'll bring the intrigue. Ready for a mystery or an adventure? Let's go.
Thalassophobics beware. Today we're talking about one of the scariest bodies of water on the earth. From the book of Genesis until today, floods have been one of humanity's greatest enemies. On August 15th, 1998, Barry and Lynn Collette were married at Long Sutton Church near Hampshire, UK, before spending their wedding night at a hotel in Maidens Green, Berkshire, and traveling north on Sunday. By all accounts, the couple were sensible, fine people who loved each other greatly, but I can't help but think their wedding day was marred by one of the worst United Kingdom terror incidents that happened in the entire 20th century. You see, the day the Collettes were married was the same day the real IRA, a provisional splinter group of the actual IRA, the Irish Republican Army, set off a massive bomb in Omagh, Northern Ireland, that killed 29 and injured 220. It was the deadliest Northern Ireland incident of the Troubles, and it happened because the real IRA, who were confusingly not, in fact, the real IRA, but just called themselves that, opposed the actual real IRA, Irish Republican Army, ceasefire and the Good Friday Agreement signed earlier in the year. This group was against peace. So imagine the Collettes had mixed feelings in August as they drove towards the beautiful Bolton Abbey area of North Yorkshire, wondering if the bomb might be an omen or a harbinger of something worse to come. Now, Barry was a computer guy and his new wife, Lynn, a student nurse. Good people. They got married on a Saturday, and by Sunday night, they were near Bolton Abbey, staying in a holiday cottage in Appletreewick, a tiny village of 200 people on the shores of the River Wharfe. That Sunday night, they likely huddled up in that cottage as a fierce rainstorm beat down. swelling the river wharf to dangerous levels. Monday the 17th, the rain abated for a bit, and Barry and Lynn decided to go for a walk by the river, not overly familiar with the area, and maybe not even aware of the dangers of the Strid, a stretch of river that many people today call a drowning machine. UK officers believe the couple went into the water slightly north of Barton Bridge near Stepping Stones after setting off from their honeymoon cottage at Appletreewick on Monday. They just wanted to have a bit of a nature walk and stretch their legs after a long drive and being cooped up in their cottage during the rain. Totally understandable. Unfortunately, they were never seen alive again. A local man, Desmond Thomas of Pembroke Dock, was walking near the river that fateful Monday with his family and said the level, speed, and turbulence of the water looked like flood water. It rose a matter of feet in seconds. He also apparently saw Mr. Collett, caught in the deadly current of the Strid, rush past him in a blur.
I went to the water's edge, and just as I got there, I saw a man's body, who I now know to be Barry, pop out of the water. The face popped up towards me, and within a matter of seconds it disappeared.
Terrifying and heart-wrenching. So what happened? Well, many people over the years have tried to jump across the Strid. Certainly it's doable. Only about 6 to 6.5 feet wide in some places, depending on the time of the year and the level of water in the river. But on this particular Monday, that would have been even more ill-advised than normal. The river bailiff for that stretch of the Strid, and if you're American, think maybe of a game warden, was Charles Hoyle. He found Mrs. Collett's jacket in the water the Tuesday after she disappeared, and he said that on the Monday the couple was lost, he personally witnessed the river rise 5 feet in less than 60 seconds because of the rain from the night before. This was something he said he had only seen happen about 6 times before. Superintendent Parker of the local constabulary said, "They were a sensible couple. We do not believe they tried to jump over the Strid. The water was very high, and we have no reason to think they would do anything like that." Well, we don't know exactly what happened. We don't know how the Strid claimed these 2 lovely honeymooners, but it did. Barry and Lynn just got too close to what might well be the most dangerous tiny stretch of water in the world. They were not the first victims of the Strid. They may not have even been the 100th or even the 1000th. In 1875, the local paper, the Craven Herald and Pioneer, reports that 2 grappling irons for rescue were suspended from trees near the Strid so that people who fell in might somehow, some way, be rescued. The paper reports, when nearing the Strid, one's feelings of hilarity are somewhat subdued by seeing 2 grappling irons suspended from the branch of a tree and a rope with a weight attached, snugly ensconced in a square wooden frame. The sight of these implements does not give rise to the most pleasant of reflections, but it is well to have them at hand for fear anyone should be so unfortunate as to slip into the water and require their application. Well, for centuries, people in that area have respected and trembled at their beautiful river, and the poet William Wordsworth, he of "I wandered lonely as a cloud" fame, wrote an utterly haunting, poignant, and striking poem over 200 years ago about a young boy who also lost his life while trying to leap across the Strid. Now, I need to tell you that I wasn't ever much of a fan of poetry or Wordsworth back in the day when I began college as an English major. Had I been exposed to this poem, however, maybe I would have felt a little different. It's tragic, to be sure, but in a pretty evocative way, almost like a creepy ghost story. Well, let's read a few lines of this amazing poetry, The Force of Prayer, which revolves around a Strid disaster. Young Romilly through Barton Woods is ranging high and low, and holds a greyhound in a leash to let slip upon buck or doe. and the pair have reached that fearful chasm, how tempting to bestride, for lordly wharf is there pent in with rocks on either side. This striding place is called the Strid, a name which it took of yore. 1,000 years hath it borne that name, and shall 1,000 more. And hither is young Romilly come, and what may now forbid that he perhaps for the 100th time shall bound across the Strid? He sprang in glee, for what cared he that the river was strong and the rocks were steep? But the greyhound in the leash hung back and checked him in his leap. The boy is in the arms of Wharf and strangled by a merciless force, for nevermore was young Romilly seen until he rose a lifeless corpse. Well, hello, and thanks for listening. I'm Chase, a historian and writer originally from Birmingham, now living in the Monterey, California area. Now, I love history, and history is the whole focus of this podcast, but not just any history. Here we specialize in the strange, the fascinating, the mysterious, the whimsical, the wild, the provoking, and, like today, the eerie. We'll cover the kind of topics that Dan Carlin in Hardcore History probably won't touch, but we will try to do them with that kind of commitment to research and detail. Now, myself, I got a doctoral degree in counseling, and I'm finishing up a PhD in history, but I never really grew up from that 5th grade boy in Alabama that loved mysteries, urban legends, myths, and great stories. Now, with a bit of academic experience under my belt, I'd like to explore the truth of some of those fantastic tales, and I'm glad you're willing to join me on the ride. For a show with interesting in the title, the very first word, there's a lot of pressure to pick out a really engaging, captivating topic for the first episode. And I think, though dark, you'll be pleased with the choice, even if you've never heard of the Bolton Strid, which is a harrowing and deadly stretch of the Wharfe River that runs for a few hundred meters in northern England near the picturesque village of Bolton Abbey. Locals called the Strid the stream that swallows people and England's killer creek, but even up close, it doesn't really appear to be all that dangerous. However, like a coral snake, it's a beautiful sight to behold until you touch it, or it touches you. An 1839 article in the Manchester Guardian newspaper notes that nobody can stand beside the Strid long without feeling a sense of its power and savage grandeur grow upon him. It is indeed a place most tempting to bestride or jump across. One slip of the foot and the leap is into eternity, however, the unnamed reporter writes. More recently, the New York Times, in describing the Strid, writes, "The Strid is a segment of the River Wharfe which runs past the tranquil ruins of Bolton Priory, an ancient monastery. A few yards upstream from the Strid, the river is shallow and wide, about 30 feet up to 90 feet from bank to bank, but then the terrain squeezes the river so tightly that it is effectively turned on its side. Instead of wide and shallow, it becomes narrow and deep, a powerful wedge of water racing through a crevasse riddled with underwater caves and overhangs. This is the Bolton Strid." Legend claims the Bolton Strid is the single most dangerous stretch of water in the entire world. They say, and hey, they've said it for decades, maybe even centuries, that the Strid has a 100% fatality rate for those who fall in it. There's no escape and no rescue. But to look at it, it's just kind of a rapidly flowing but not terrifying stream about 45 minutes northwest of Leeds in England and a little over an hour slightly northwest of York, England, in the middle of a wide and beautiful patch of great green, pretty fields. The Strid is in northern England. It's just a hair under 2 hours drive from Gretna Green in Scotland, So that means the water is going to be cold. If you're American or from pretty much anywhere other than northern England, you're probably wondering by now what in the world a Strid is anyway. So here's the thing. The Strid, at least this Strid, is itself not a river. It's just part of a river. North of the tiny village of Bolton Abbey, there is a short but potent stretch of the river wharf that has been called the Strid for hundreds of years. Its name originally came from an Old English, maybe Welsh word, strith, which means turmoil. Later on, though, this was corrupted and conflated to strid, like stride, as in to take a long step, and it referred to the possibility, the very dangerous possibility, of striding across the river. More accurately, I think we would say bounding or leaping across the river, because the narrowest point right now is probably around 6 to 6.5 meters, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 meters wide, which is a pretty large stride for all but the Goliaths and Victor Wembanyama's among us at normal walking speed. Although, if you're running fast like, say, Usain Bolt at the height of his speeding powers, his stride was over 9 feet, which is incredible. So the Strid is a portion of that river wharf in Yorkshire, England. The wharf itself is a beautiful river that flows through stunning countryside. It begins around Beckermans and Outershaw in central northwest England, and it flows southeast for about 65 miles to where it ends just above Leeds. It's a great river for fly fishing, and you can catch brown trout or grayling there. It's also a wonderful river for bird watching, if that's your jam. Well over 200 species of birds have been seen along the river wharf. It's not the longest river in the UK. It's not even the 20th longest, but it's remarkable for its beauty and mixture of serenity and kayakable rapids. Well, until you get near the Bolton Abbey estates, where things drastically change. For most of the river's 65 miles or so, the depth is pretty modest, usually 10 feet or less. There is a couple of places where it goes maybe 24, 29, under 30 feet deep, but those spots are few and far between. The river is rarely very wide, comparatively speaking, maybe, as I said, 90 feet or so at its maximum, but something weird happens along that stretch they call the Strid. It's like the river just kind of turns sideways. Really, it kind of turns upside down. Instead of being moderately wide and shallow, it becomes very narrow, but perilously deep. What makes the river wharf stretch known as the Strid so dangerous? Well, Carolyn Roberts is a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, and she's also the former Frank Jackson Professor of the Environment at Gresham College, London. She says,
beautiful rivers can certainly be dangerous to humans. The Nile has a lot of crocodiles. The Zambezi will push you over the Victoria Falls, and beware of swallowing any sort of water from the lower reaches of the Colorado.
While the Strid is also beautiful and it looks relatively innocuous, it's similarly deadly. It kills because of its geomorphology, she says.
The form of the channel, which is influenced by the nature of the rocks over which it tumbles. Rather than carving a stately way through silt, it twists and turns through flat and overhanging rocks, falling over the edge of a limestone formation. Vortices in the flow will trap bodies under the water close to the bed or the sides. Whilst the turbulence will render someone unconscious very quickly, it is not a good place to play. With the Strid portion of the river being so narrow, often around 6 or 7 feet, one does wonder about that depth. And the thing is, finding reliable depth numbers is really difficult because the river flows so violent.
In 2021, YouTuber Jackassnacks went there and he measured the depth of the Strid using a portable sonar hooked to a fishing line. And he came up with a depth at its deepest spot of over 216 feet. Imagine that, not even 10 feet wide, rushing pulsing waters, but over 200 feet deep. There's even one section where he measures the depth of the river at a place that looks no more than 6 feet across, and the depth there measures well over 100 feet. It's crazy. And watching his video, I got to tell you, the river just kind of looks innocent and pretty right up until you get to the Strid. Then it's just angry, surrounded by what looks like moss-covered rocks. Some have disputed those sonar findings, so we just aren't 100% sure about the depth there, but it's deep enough to cause big, big trouble. Some other YouTubers have immersed their waterproof GoPro-style cameras into the Strid, and several cameras have likely been lost in this process. Some of the footage I've seen shows really turbulent waters as well as a genuinely scary, kind of unnerving ledge of stone that's just a few feet below the surface where the river kind of expands underwater, which demonstrates one of the likely mechanisms for the danger. People can slip or fall into the seemingly shallow water and then get yanked under those ledges far too quickly to get rescued or immersed somewhere else with their head above water. Barry and Lynn Collette's story, which we led off with, reminds me of an incident with my family when we first moved to the Monterey area of California, except by grace, our story ended up much better. One day in 2018, we were driving up the one right next to the Pacific coast, and we looked at, right after we had passed Carmel Beach to our right, and we saw a beautiful, not crowded beach surrounded by the most incredible scenery. Now, not a lot of people were there, and that should have been a clue to us, but if you've never been to the Pacific Ocean, I will tell you, even in Southern California, it's pretty cold, and not so many people swim in the ocean in our part of California as do in, say, Florida. Baywatch doesn't really sell that enough. The first time I stuck my feet in the water in San Diego, California, I was shocked as a person that came from swimming in the Gulf Coast all the time. But here at this place in Northern California, we're really kind of Central California, but people call us Northern California, and the water is even colder than in SoCal. If you got kids, and I've got 5, they like the water. We went to this beach knowing nothing about it. We got in the water a little bit and played along the water's edge, and I noticed the waves were pretty remarkably violent. Me and the kids, nevertheless, even though they were pretty young, got in the water, had a good old time, and went home, no problem. At some point, though, we found out what beach we were at. It's called Monastery Beach officially, but the locals call it Mortuary Beach because it's so dangerous. You see, in California, they have these things called sneaker waves, which sound like a myth, but they aren't. They are waves that all of a sudden well up from the ocean and can easily pull somebody in. And the thing about Monastery Beach or Mortuary Beach is even just a few yards off the sand, the water gets very deep and the currents are incredibly strong. And many people, apparently enough so that the beach has the nickname Mortuary Beach, have lost their lives in that area. Well, water is dangerous, and the Strid is reputedly one of the most dangerous bodies of water on the earth. Is that just hype, though? Is it an urban legend, sort of magnified by Wordsworth's poetry and accounts like the 19th century horror story that Gertrude Atherton wrote called The Striding Place, which, by the way, for a story written in the 1800s, it's pretty good and it's really spooky. That last line kind of punches above its weight for a 127-year-old story. Read it if you dare. In that story, Atherton describes the Strid, writing, "There was no lonelier spot in England, nor one which had the right to claim so many ghosts, if ghosts there were." As the New York Times reports, an old English rhyme also points out the hazards of the Strid and the Wharfe River that holds it. That rhyme says,
Wharfe is clear and air is lithe. Where air kills one, Wharfe kills five.
The River Aire, though 30 miles longer, wider, and nearer the River Wharfe, is far less dangerous in terms of swimming than the Strid and the Wharfe. A recent popular YouTube video from around 2 years ago is titled, They Didn't Listen and the Strid Murdered Them. And of course, murdered is in all caps. But has the danger of this river been blown out of proportion? It's a good question. And of the many websites and YouTube videos that mention the Strid, it's hard to find anybody that's done actual, real historical research into this place. But that's what we're going to do now. It's time machine time. So let's go back into the past and see if the Strid is as dangerous as it's cracked up to be. Newspaper reports brim with recent casualties all along the Wharfe River near the Strid. The Wharfe River, not the Strid section, is popular for swimming during the summer, even though the water is ridiculously cold. It also has swifter current than you might realize, even in the non-Strid sections, and there's lots of unpredictable dips and depth changes. In fact, less than a week ago at the time of this recording, which is July of 2025, a man drove into the wharf, not the Strid portion, but above it, near the Bolton Abbey, to save his daughter from distress in the water. He succeeded in rescuing her after he dove in, but the coldness of the water caused him to go into cardiac arrest, and he was only saved due to the diligence and life-saving skills of 2 local men who rescued him and performed CPR until the air ambulance arrived. The Strid itself in modernity is surrounded by warning signs, but no fences. The signs warn the Strid is dangerous and has claimed lives in the past. Please stand well back and beware slippery rocks. The signs keep most people away from the water, at least, and nobody seems to swim there, but they do fall in from time to time. In 2010, 8-year-old Aaron Page from Pontefract drowned after he slipped from a rock. Someone nearby quickly reached out and grabbed him, but the poor young guy was dragged beneath the surface before he could be rescued. Further back, 1934, the Strid took the life of an artist who painted her and admired her beauty. This is the watercolor painter Arthur Reginald Smith. You can Google him and see some of his watercolors of the river. As the Times also reports, he was 63 at the time, and many people were baffled as to why a guy that age would have ended up in the water because they believed he was too old to have attempted to jump across it. Now, the above 4 deaths that we've already mentioned, the poor 8-year-old, the artist, and the honeymooners, are pretty much the only ones you can find on the internet attributed to the Strid right now. Most of the sites that warn of the horrors of the Strid mention those 4 deaths and allude to what might as well be hundreds of others. Now, the Snopes website, which considers urban legends, gives the Strid a true rating relative to the dangers of that river stretch, and it adds another death from the August 14th, 1877 Leeds Mercury that reported about the death of a man named Samuel Naylor who drowned while trying to jump across the Strid. The paper says every exertion was made to get him out, and after dragging the river for 4 hours, his dead body was found and conveyed to the Devonshire Hotel. Now, 5 deaths in 150 years are horrible and a tragedy. But that's not by any means enough to earn the Strid many of the dark accolades it has received. So have other people drowned there, or is this just a question of an amplified reputation for danger? Some people think so. In fact, One wannabe intrepid web reporter, Daniel Piggott, posting on the travel website travelmademedoit.com, put on his myth-busting cap and basically spat in the face of the river and its lore. And he said,
despite its infamy as a place of death, there is no official death toll at the Strid, although a couple honeymooning in the area in 1998 was reported missing in the news. There's no proof that anyone has ever died at the Strid. The deathly reputation doesn't come from any actual deaths, it seems, but from a cautionary tale.
Later in his article, Daniel, though warning readers to be careful, writes,
Anyway, let's look into how you can visit this immensely beautiful, not deadly place. Let's start by looking at its exact location.
Well, the location of the Strid is certainly not hidden. You can look it up on Google Maps and find plenty of ways to drive there if you're in northern England, but is Piggott right? Is this really just an inflated cautionary tale? Well, here's where we have to do actual historical research, as I said, and dive into some archives. But first, I need to say that the way Daniel sort of dismissed the deaths of the honeymooning couple that disappeared and said there's no proof that anyone has ever died at the Strid is honestly just kind of ridiculous. Both Barry and Colette disappeared in that river at a time when it rose 5 feet in under 5 minutes. Barry was literally seen in the water, actually drowning by an eyewitness, and both of their bodies were discovered downstream of the Strid. So, this is not a situation in which those deaths were exaggerated. But were those deaths, the 5 we talked about, and the other deaths simply anomalies? Unfortunately and tragically, the record of the Strid is grim. The Strid, as narrow as it is all it's cracked up to be, and maybe more. And Mr. Piggott, swell guy that he might be, apparently did not do enough research before declaring a very deadly, genuinely historically deadly stretch of river not deadly. Well, the July 22nd, 1966 Craven Herald and Pioneer, again, the local paper, reports on the drowning death in the Strid of young Neville Cuthbertson of Hazelwood Orphanage, who is at the Strid on a school outing with teachers literally walking right behind the students, but not directly with them, which is a factor which the coroner said ultimately contributed to the death of Neville. He simply slipped into the water and was whisked away before anybody could react. Very, very sad tale. In 1961, The Guardian reports that 17-year-old Peter Gunning of Allerton fell in and drowned trying to jump over the gorge. The paper notes, many people have died trying to jump the Strid or stride. The spot where a stride is possible, or a leap is possible, is marked by a huge rounded stone in mid-channel a few yards before the waterfall. It is possible to jump to the stone, but a slip means little chance of survival, for there are no handholds and the current runs under rocks which are hollowed out. How utterly awful. The July 21st, 1951 Manchester Guardian further reports on another drowning of a 70-year-old man named David Hughes, formerly of Grafton Villas near Leeds. Further back, the June 9, 1932 Guardian reports on the drowning death of a young 23-year-old Mormon missionary named Lawrence T. Heath, who drowned at the Strid. His friends report that he jumped across the Strid to a boulder in the river to take a photograph. Quote, he was proceeding from the boulder to the other side when he slipped and fell into the stream. He clung to a rock for a few seconds, and his friends went to look for a life belt or a life jacket, but when they returned, the young man had just lost his handhold on the rock, and he was struggling in the water. Tragically, people have been losing their lives for dramatic photographs for well over 100 years. A few years earlier, the Manchester Guardian also reports on the death of an athletic and relatively fit man, an engineer named William Taylor. The paper reports that Taylor had successfully jumped the Strid multiple times before, but then, quote, he attempted the leap at a point where it never yet been known to be successfully accomplished. He jumped across, but overbalanced and turned a somersault backwards into the rapids and drowned before the eyes of his father and mother, despite the efforts of his friends to rescue him. He was a married man. What a gut-wrenching article that was to read, and what a cautionary tale. Such an empty death trying to prove you can make a jump nobody else can for a guy who seemed to be so well loved and valued. Friends, life is precious, and it should be treated as such and not risked on something so transient and meaningless. There's another photograph-related death that happened in June 1951. This one may be more heart-wrenching than the other. Mr. Frank Johnson, 45, and his son Derek. Surprisingly, it was Dad, Mr. Frank, who was taking a picture near the Strid, and his foot slipped on a moss-covered rock, which those moss-covered rocks are all around this part of the river, and he fell backwards. The 18-year-old son, Derek, heroically tried to rescue his dad, and he did manage to get to him, but they were both swept away and under the water by the strong undercurrent. Have mercy. Do you want me to keep going and to recount all the drownings? We'd be here for a long, long time. And honestly, I'm sure it wouldn't do either of us much good mentally or emotionally. So let me just fly through some of the headlines. May 1869, Lady Firth, wife of Sir Charles Firth, falls into the Strid accidentally on a walk and is lost. September 1870, a young man named P.A. Brown attempted to jump across the Strid like so many, but fell short, falling in as his mother watched. Though people tried to help, he was lost quickly. The paper reports his brother was unable to render any rescue, the rush of water being so strong. The 1883 West Yorkshire Weekly Examiner reports on the drowning death of either 46 or 19-year-old George Benton of Leeds. Now, that's quite a spread in age. Well, one paper said he was 46, one paper said he was 19. Mr. Benton attempted to jump across the Strid, just like many, many others, and he fell to his death. Once in the water, he was said to have immediately surfaced once, but went back down very quickly, and though they threw grappling irons into the water to try to get to him, nobody could do so. September 11, 1894, Mr. George Henry Ashworth, a church organist, went to the Strid on a fishing holiday, fell in, never to be seen again. 1898, the Liverpool Mercury reported on the sad death of a 4-year-old Marjorie Harrison, who had apparently wandered away from her mother and fallen in. August 1922, young Malcolm Ellison of Harrogate, a middle school boy visiting the Strid in the company of about 200 classmates and teachers, lost his life while the teachers were eating. His young friend Harold Hitchin made a valiant attempt to save him, but just barely missed. October 1927, Winifred May Hodgson, 29, leapt into the surging river, possibly intentionally. 1928, 27-year-old Miss Lily Baines lost her life in the Strid, and the Craven Herald and Pioneer reports that Miss Baines was the second Strid victim in the past 2 months, and the Ramsbottom Observer actually claims she was the third victim, which I think tells us that more people have died drowning than are recorded in these various local newspapers. August 1928, Mr. G.E. Thackeray, a retired bank manager, somehow fell in. The paper notes in 1928 that several people have been drowned there lately. June 1937, Alec J. Towley, a gardener from Riverview, disappeared with his overcoat right next to the Strid and almost certainly drowned therein as reported by the Craven Herald and Pioneer. July 1939, the Craven Herald and Pioneer also reports the Strid-related drowning death of Stanley Horrell, a prominent Leeds businessman and former member of that city council. He was 65 years of age and last seen right next to the rocks of the Strid. December 1958, Margaret Crabtree in her mid-30s drowned in the Strid. Her husband, schoolteacher Selwyn, reports, quote, "He did not think he had pushed her deliberately when she fell into the Strid," which might be the most suspicious statement ever. Now, to be fair to Selwyn, however, the paper does report that he slipped and put out his arm to catch himself and accidentally pushed his wife. Oh man, that's horrible. The Craven Herald and Pioneer also reports on the 1964 death of Edward Robert Shaw Wright, a 53-year-old mill director from Halifax. Now, those are an awful lot of drownings for one narrow and short length of river, and like I said earlier, there's probably many, many more, but that sample should more than suffice. Quite certainly, this thin stretch of river really is something of a killing machine. But did it really take the life of a potential future king of Scotland in the 1100s? Well, we're going to have to travel even further back in time to answer that one. But for now, I will close this first episode of the pod with these poetic words from the May 1859 edition of the Bradford Observer newspaper in an article entitled Pilgrimage to the Valley of Desolation.
They say through the tangled branches we may notice a white mist in the distance. This mist is from the splashing Strid. It was there when the drowning cry of the boy echoed through this ancient forest. It was there when a poor, gentle girl stood upon the slippery rock, and the boiling waters fascinated her giddy head, and she cast herself into the torrent. We see this Strid with its vast coils of waters gliding, like great merciless serpents. Round the tumbled rocks to the narrow precipice, very daintily tread. We see the blended confusion of rocks here, smooth with the polish of the passing current. They're deeply bored by the sharp eddies, and there again smeared with an olive slime to the very edge of the precipice, where stood the boy with his greyhound, and thought the grid narrow enough for a safe jump. At our feet, a chaos of jarring, foaming waters roaring with the anger that has lasted 1,000 years, and these immortal rocks with the roaring of the Strid to contemplate and the echo of the boy's wails to be heard in the distant woods.
Well, on the next episode, which should be out the same week as episode 1, we will read some of the earliest historical coverage about the Strid. We're gonna smash some myths definitively, and we're gonna prove whether or not the Strid actually has a legit 100% fatality rate for all who fall in her. And we're going to tell you about the genuinely most deadly and dangerous body of water to fall into in the entire world. And as a little hint, it's not the Strid. As bad as the Strid is, this one is much, much worse. One more thing, as an outro, please enjoy the new song, The Merciless Strid by the Airsats Bolton Bard Eaters, commissioned just for this episode. We're going to hear more about the song, and we'll hear it again in episode number 2. For now, thanks for listening, buckle in, and enjoy some music.
Him along in tow, and the pair have reached that chasm, how tempting to bestride.